Welcome to Opinionated here on I24 News, the show that challenges consensus, analyzes the events that shape our world, and draws out the views of our guests for the consideration of you, the viewing audience. I'm your host, Benjamin Anthony, CEO of the Miriam Institute. It's my pleasure to welcome retired general and former national security advisor to President Trump during the first Trump administration, H.R. McMaster. H.R., welcome.
Benjamin, great to be with you.
Thank you for having me. So let me just ask you, there are very clear lines on either side of this negotiation. The Americans want to discuss the end of the nuclear weapons program. The Israelis want to discuss the end of the nuclear weapons program, the ballistic missile program, and the terror proxy program. And the Iranians are saying that they're only willing to discuss the issue of enrichment. How are these two sides, the Americans and the Iranians, going to bridge that gap?
Well, Benjamin, I don't think they're going to be able to bridge that gap. And I think what you're going to see is a period of time during which there will be no progress. President Trump always tries to get a deal first. But of course, he has to deal with the intransigence of the theocratic dictatorship in Tehran. And I think it will become clear to him that he's not getting anywhere. And just as he did previously, when he gave them 60 days before the United States joined in that very successful IDF 12-day campaign, I think that's how this is going to play out. Iranian intransigence based on the nature of that theocratic dictatorship in Tehran, followed by, I would anticipate, military action against really everything you named, their missile program, their nuclear program, and I think also some of the tools of repression that they have used most recently to murder tens of thousands of their own people.
So assuming that that military threat that I talked about is a credible military threat, and it sounds like you're saying it's a very credible military threat, what's it likely to look like? There are a range of options in front of the president, obviously. Most people say that he is not seeking to put boots on the ground in Iran, but between a blockade and that outcome of boots on the ground, his options are vast. Where do you see this going?
I think it's going to be a range of capabilities that they could be targeted. So if the president does decide to use military force, I think at the top of the list is any of the latent nuclear-related, missile-related capabilities. What still is there? We've seen them already try to reconstitute military targets associated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, the Basij, their ability maybe to communicate with one another. And to share data to repress their own people. But I think other targets could be economic, Benjamin, associated with the cash flow that the regime needs for its priorities, which are to reconstitute those programs, and then also to reconstitute their terrorist proxies and militia proxies in the region that have been dealt such severe blows by the IDF in recent months.
So one of the things I know that Israel wants to see is the avoidance of releasing any of those sanctions in the event that a deal is struck, for precisely the reason you alluded to keep the pressure on the regime. You spoke about the success of Israel's combined strikes on Iran that were then joined by the Americans. Do you think there's a scenario in which the Israelis would join this strike? And are we looking to topple this regime? Is that the outcome that we're now primed to bring about?
Well, Benjamin, I could foresee maybe initially the IDF, sitting it out for a moment. But of course, when you can conduct these strikes, Iran has the opportunity to respond. They still have some missile capabilities, drone capabilities. They've threatened a regional war if there are these strikes. So I could see them using those capabilities against their Arab neighbors and against Israel. And then I think that's when Israel would certainly join in the campaign. I think, Benjamin, what we all need to see is a change in that regime in Iran. I mean, after they've murdered tens of thousands of people, how can anyone think otherwise than that? And this is for, obviously, our security, the security of the region. But hey, how about the security of the Iranian people? The people and the country have tremendous promise, tremendous potential, but they've just had the life choked out of them since 1979. And so, I think that it ought to be the objective to help incentivize and support those who are calling for a change in the nature of that government. Of course, that's going to be up to the Iranian people. And what's sad about it is, as weak as the Iranian regime is, they just have to be stronger than any organized opposition. And they're quite good at murdering unarmed people in the streets.
Now, you, of course, know President Trump to a degree that very few do. I want to ask you, not from a political point of view, but just more of a policy point of view. There's obviously a strong voice within that party that is isolationist in nature. Do you think that they are having success in staying the president's hand thus far? Or do you think that this delay is merely a result of him needing to steadily bring the force build-up about that he seems to have now come very close to completing?
We know President Trump is not inflexible in terms of his mindset. And so what he will do is consult with a broad range of people. Many of them will say, hey, if you do this, it's going to be a major regional war. Don't do it. They'll highlight what they see as maybe the prospect of another long war like the war in Iraq. And this is what animates a lot of those who are sort of neo-isolationists. And they see, as a result, the Middle East mainly as a mess to be avoided. They also don't want the United States to fight other people's fights. And so what you'll hear some of these people say is, oh, hey, don't let Israel drag the United States into a war. They'll use that kind of an argument. And so he will hear those arguments because those arguments come in large measure from some of his most staunch supporters. But President Trump knows the problem with Iran. He knows that Iran has been fighting a proxy war against who they call the Great Satan, the United States, for over 4 decades. And he used to say to me, Benjamin, hey, General, everywhere I look, there's a problem in the Middle East, Iran's behind it. So he knows the nature of the regime. He understands their permanent hostility to the United States, Israel, and their Arab neighbors, by the way, who they've engaged in this strategy of perpetuating a sectarian civil war to keep their Arab neighbors weak, so they can establish this land bridge to the Mediterranean, build the ring of fire around Israel, the ring of fire that they lit on October 7th, 2023. And then, of course, they reaped the whirlwind from that and now have been exposed as a profoundly weak dictatorship.
I know you're not a betting man, but again, given your personal knowledge of President Trump, were you to be one, would you bet that he is going to strike, or is he going to reach a deal?
I would bet that he is going to strike, and that would be based on President Trump's character, but also, as I mentioned, the intransigence, the ideology of the theocratic dictatorship in Iran.
General, let me ask you one other question, if you would go with me on this. I'd like you to put the lie, if you're of that view, to the isolationist wing within the party that says that the US should stand back from everything that's going on in the Middle East. Put the lie to that. Tell us why such a theory is just not practical in the modern moment, and why doing so would be to the detriment of the United States.
Well, Benjamin, of course, we know that today that threats that develop abroad can only be dealt with at an exorbitant cost once they reach your shores, right? And of course, Israel has this mentality already because you're surrounded, by hostile organizations from Hezbollah to Hamas to Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and with Iran behind so much of that. So in the United States, with these great moats of the Atlantic and Pacific, sometimes we forget that. But hey, just go back to 9/11, right? September 11th, 2001. We knew that Al-Qaeda was a threat. We fired a few cruise missiles and called it a day, and then we suffered the consequences of the most destructive terrorist attack in history. So I think we have to recognize that we don't have to solve the world's problems. The United States can't do it, right? We're not going to conciliate the furies of the Middle East. But disengagement from these complex problem sets allows your enemies to marshal strength, to plan, prepare, train, and then execute operations against you and your interests abroad. And I would say, Benjamin, the United States does prioritize the security of Israel as well. The president understands that and understands that really for there to be progress toward peace in the Middle East, Iran has to transform into a new form of government that again ends this permanent hostility to the United States, Israel, and its Arab neighbors.
Well, General McMaster, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope to have you back on Opinionated in the very near future, and I wish Godspeed to the men and women in uniform serving beneath the flag of the great United States of America. Thank you, General.
Thank you, Benjamin.
My next guest concluded his illustrious military career as commander of the IDF's Northern Formation with a focus on Lebanon. On October 7th, in a story of courage and unshakable values, together with his wife, this retired general rescued his son and young family from Hamas's murderous terror attack, saving numerous other Israelis as they rushed to the salvation of their loved ones. But he's now entered the political fray, joining Yair Lapid's Yesh Atid party. To discuss those actions and decisions, I'm delighted to welcome Noam Tibon. Noam, welcome to Opinionated.
Such a pleasure to be here with you because, you know, we served together in the Nahal Brigade, and I can admit that this guy is a wonderful soldier.
Thank you, Noam.
A tough guy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And you know, your story on October 7th is very well known. But I think what's less known is just the number of people who were not members of your family that you and your wife saved en route to save your family, even though you were in a race against time to get to your family. Tell us just briefly about who it was that you saved.
You know, my main values, like most of the Israelis, Kol Israel Arevim Ze Lazeh. We are all together. And so on our journey to Nahal Oz, even though that our family was surrounded by terrorists, we saved Bar and Lior from Oranit, near Kibbutz Nir Am, and we took them back all the way to Ashkelon. And then I fell into an ambush of Maglan unit. 3 officers were already dead, Chen Buchris from Ashdod, Yiftach Yabetz from Ramat HaSharon, and Afik Rosenthal from Kfar Menachem. And, you know, I took the rifle and the helmet of Chen, and I killed 2 terrorists. And then 3 other soldiers were wounded in this ambush. So I took them back. One of them, Yedidia from Jerusalem, was in a terrible condition. You know, he got a bullet in his belly and he was bleeding. Mm-hmm. And, you know, in the military, you have what you call the golden hour. If you take even a severe wounded to the hospital in 1 hour, you can save his life. And this was the case. And I look at his eyes. I couldn't leave him there. I don't leave anyone behind me. So I grabbed the 3 of them on my Jeep. I gave them to Gali in Mefalsim. And basically, she saw an ambulance near Shderot, and this is what saved his life. And, you know, later on, I was fighting with the great soldier of Maglan and Sayeret Givati inside Kibbutz Nahal Oz, and at the end of the day, we took out 400 people. So I'm so proud that I didn't leave anyone behind me on that day.
Prior to October the 7th, however, there was a very large number of people who refused to undertake their reserve duty, who declared that they wouldn't undertake their reserve duty, who refused to join the ranks that they were supposed to be a part of. Many people believe that that's part of the reason that there was the massacre on October the 7th. Reconcile the desire to have the ultra-Orthodox drafted with the permissiveness that was shown to so many who refused to serve.
This is one of the lies running by Benjamin Netanyahu and his poison machine, because he is in charge of the biggest failure in the history of the state of Israel. In his term, we lost more Jews in 1 day since the Holocaust. And the main issue is how to make the IDF stronger and bigger. And we need more 3 divisions to fight simultaneously in the north and in the south, and to win a decisive victory. We need to change our whole security strategy, that we will not let monsters like Hamas and Hezbollah live on our border. Once we see a sign of terror who threat Israel, we should attack in the whole Middle East. in our new government, we will recruit the ultra-Orthodox. And what the government is trying to do now is hurting the IDF. And it's terrible because we really need them. And they're going to be great soldiers. I met them in Netzach Yehuda. I met them in my long career. As you know, I have an open heart to those ultra-Orthodox soldiers. And yes, it's not to be equal. We really need them.
So let me ask you something. I agree with something that you've said publicly. Everyone who was in situ on October 7th needs to go home, both on the political echelon and in the military echelon. But then we also want a commission of inquiry that will reach back. Yair Lapid did not really make any profound changes when he was in situ as prime minister to the policy of Benjamin Netanyahu. And so why is Yair Lapid given potentially a pass by you when you could go and start your own party or maybe find yourself in the company of other generals, somewhere such as that? Why Lapid? It seems a bit odd to me. And the other is, Lapid is someone who has promoted the two-state solution for years. Is that something that you would support once you're in the party, once you're in the Knesset?
I think that in our camp, we have too many parties. We don't need new parties. And that's why I didn't form my own party. I chose Yesh Atid because this is a very strong party with long history. And I think Yair Lapid was a great prime minister. And as I told you, he was the one that did two governments without the ultra-Orthodox. And I think that we need a government without the ultra-Orthodox, without Benjamin Netanyahu, to bring new forces. And, I think that there will be, I support unity in our camp that will bring us more force to the election.
And regarding the next day in Gaza, Noam, where do you see that going? Are we looking at a two-state paradigm under such a government, or is there a different idea?
I think that regarding to Gaza, the key is right now, unfortunately, in the hand of the Americans. Donald Trump and the headquarters in Kiryat Gat are running Gaza, and this is one of the biggest mistakes.
That's a failure, if that's the case.
Yeah, it's a failure. And as you know, Benjamin Netanyahu is not standing and talking to the Israeli media and telling, I agree to such, and we always hear it from somebody else. And I believe that, this was my belief all my life, that the security of Israel should be only in the hands of the IDF and the state of Israel. We don't trust anyone else. So the Americans are a great friend, but right now, what's going on in Gaza, the Hamas is still armed. We don't know what would be the mechanism to take the weapons. And, Qatar is inside, Turkey is inside, and basically the Israeli government is not controlling. And this is not good. I supported all the time that we will work hand to hand with Egypt, because Egypt is a neighbor and we have very good security relationship, and we can handle it together. I thought this would be a better solution. And regarding to the future, the most important issue is the perimeter, that we will have land inside Gaza to protect all the kibbutzim along the border. On the first week of the war, I said, let's start from the south, from Philadelphia, and then first of all have a perimeter to protect the border from the inside. And I think this is very important to any future solution, that we will protect those kibbutzim that are just coming back, very sensitive, that they will feel secure.
Noam Tibon, thank you so much for being with me here on Opinionated. I'm sure you join me in celebrating the return of all of the hostages who've come home. That's a wonderful outcome. And I look forward to having you back on Opinionated in the very near future. Thank you.
I thought you will say that you hope that you will see me on the government.
Well, if there's one thing I know about you, Noam, it's difficult to stop you. Thank you very much.
Friend.
No, on another note, as Israel still struggles with what the day after this war might look like, Overseas, with an uncanny degree of reflexive simplicity at best, many voices continue to demand that we enter into a two-state solution forthwith. Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, and Mohammed bin Salman are all peddlers of this insufferable dross. Now, that collective would be irritating enough. But far more egregious to me are the Jewish organizations who echo this nonsense. The ADL and the Union of Reformed Judaism are just two of those that spring to mind. Personally, I've always believed that the two-state prescription should be consigned to the dustbin of history, and the vast majority of Israelis agree with me. Remember, after all, the October 7th massacre was a direct result of the Land for Peace formula espoused by the two-staters. So rather than allowing foreign proponents of the idea to continue their untrammeled trot into the fantastical, I'd prefer that they answer some very simple questions, such as, 1, is your two-state plan even remotely practicable? Using any map of your choosing, I defy you to demonstrate how a contiguous state for the Palestinian Arabs, incorporating parts of Judea and Samaria and the Gaza Strip, can be established without bifurcating North from South Israel. 2, can you provide any proof or precedent to support the notion that ceding yet more territory to the Palestinian Arabs will result in increased security for Israel, or does all of the evidence actually point to the very opposite outcome? 3, if the two-state solution were to be implemented, only to promptly meet with inevitable disaster, will you and your children come here and live with, and perhaps even die as a result of, the policy that you promoted? Or do you confer that dubious privilege exclusively upon the shoulders of Israelis? 4, is there any basis underpinning the presumption that Israelis require pressure from afar in order to pursue a more secure future? How to ensure that future is a debate that is alive and kicking here in Israel. But don't be confused. That debate is Israel's to have, and nobody else's. Nobody should expect us to return to what Abba Eban referred to as the Auschwitz borders. Our response to the October 7th massacre earned our people the absolute right to apply our future as we wish it to be. So, if you are unable to respond with a resounding yes to every single one of the questions I just posed, I submit to you that now would be the opportune time for you to back away from the two-state non-solution, lest a stubborn unwillingness to do so be mistaken for a reprehensible readiness within you to impose upon the Israeli people a standard that you would never accept upon yourselves. And for those who claim that their adherence to the two-state delusion is born of a deep, abiding, and unbelievably patronizing love for Israel and the Israeli people, well, you'll forgive me, but I choose to render that love unrequited. In the final analysis, after all is said and done, this land was sworn unto our forefathers by God. That's the reason we came here. That's actually it, and that's actually all. And it is to his promise that we must faithfully cling, not to the reveries and capitulations of false prophets from overseas. Rather than suffer their suggestions, we do far better to turn them back toward their own domestic quandaries, those same challenges they've proven themselves so eminently incapable of remedying, and, as they tend to those, to extend us the courtesy of allowing Israelis to fashion the gleaming future that awaits us here in this land, free of their clownish counsel. Because, with time, and if given just half a chance, as old Blue Eyes once crooned, our best is yet to come. Oh, and one more thing. Don't even think about asking us to divide Jerusalem.